which are very relevant to our seminar series. And today, Rustam is gonna talk about confidence and college applications in France, and we can't wait. So you have around 60 minutes or less for your talk, and then we can have at least 30 minutes discussions, and you take the question along your presentation.
I guess you don't mind if we interrupt you.
Okay. So yeah, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. That's amazing. So I get an introduction and I get a microphone. So if talk is bad, I can blame microphone, but hopefully it's not going to be the case. So thanks a lot for having me here. It's a great pleasure and I'm impressed. So hopefully I can deliver a good talk. Today I'm going to talk about the paper, which is a joint work with Renke Schmarke, who was a postdoc of mine, and he's going to leave us because our project is over. And Camille Terrier, who is also was a colleague of mine in Lausanne, but now she moves to Queen Mary in London. And as Supari already mentioned, it's about effect of confidence in college applications. So very broadly in this paper, we are motivated by determinants of college access. We know that colleges and universities are very important in terms of determining lifetime outcomes and many other aspects of human capital. But more precisely, we are motivated by two gaps. One is gender gap and one is socioeconomic gap. So first about gender gap, despite of the fact that already since 90s, we have higher proportion of women entering universities because they better perform in schools. If you look at the top of the distribution, if you look at the most prestigious programs and programs which leads to the highest earning, we still have a gap in favor of men. And it's even stronger gap if you control for academic ability in school. And there are some papers showing that, and if you maybe even more depressive, and I would say arguably even more important, is the gap between kids from high and low socioeconomic background. And this is a recent paper of RCT who shows that if you are a kid of top 1% of income distribution in the US, country which is supposed to have provide decent equal opportunities, you are 77 times more likely to enter prestigious colleges and universities than if you are a kid of bottom 20 distribution of income. This is, of course, crazily depressive fact. So what is it that determines these gaps? Of course, it's been a major topic and in education, labor literature, and people look at different things. So of course it's been literature from 50s and 70s, but I present only recent papers which kind of do the causal evidence due to fancy econometrics and RCTs potentially. So we know that financial constraints matter, of course they do. Information frictions here, both in terms of what colleges are bad and what colleges are good, and also in terms of whether there is a payoff or a return from college or not. Of course, preferences also matter. We know that women tend to have different preferences from men, and also low-economic panel might have different preferences, but mostly here it's a gender aspect. But only recently people start to look also on the other factors like behavioral factors. Arguably, there is only one paper. It's a recent paper in AR by Dinarsky and Korsas, which kind of look at a specific factor like complexity and uncertainty of processing information about whether you will be qualified for the tuition help and tuition waiver. So they do it in the University of Michigan, where they basically approach kids in the last year of high school, and they know those who are poor or from a poor background. They basically tell them, conditional on you being accepted, you will have tuition waiver. So they do it in advance without changing any rules. They don't provide any cash. They just tell it in advance, and this increases largely the application. So which means that kids might not understand that they qualify for it, right? So conditional. So resolving this uncertainty helps. So we bring to the table the bias, which has been, if anything, largely studied and maybe even to some tastes of people overstudied in behavioral economics, but somehow surprisingly overlooked in the context of labor in this question. So what we do is we study the confidence. So why confidence would matter for college admissions? Because If you are underconfident, it might think that you are not as good as you are, and you might not even apply to universities which are your, fair or, outside of confidence problem outcome. So you will not apply to as prestigious program as you could do. Why is it a problem from market design perspective? It's a problem because it means that you in the end have unstable match, right? So you better one mismatch. So you have kind of justified envy to someone who is worse than you post factum, but goes to a better university. This is the cost of underconfidence. The cost of overconfidence from another side is that you might be so delusional that you are so good that you apply only to Harvard and Stanford, and then in the end, you're good enough to decent universities, let's say University of Ohio, but in the end, you are not even going to university because you were delusional and applying to only prestigious programs. Very different cost of overconfidence. So all of this is, of course, matters only if you restrict yourself, if there is some kind of cost of application, right? Because in like pure theory world, you should apply everywhere. And see, of course, the theory world, in reality, people cannot apply everywhere, and there are costs of applications, and these costs of applications are even exogenous and amplified in the systems which are centralized, because typically in the centralized college admissions, you have exogenous restrictions on number of applications that you can make. In our particular case of France, it's going to be 10. You can choose 10 colleges to apply to. Yeah.
That standardized but restricted choices for this paper is going to cost more. It's going to impose more cost, right?
Yes. Yes. So in our case, it is. This cost is external validity and generalization I will discuss on the large slides, but in every college admission program, when we know in the world, there is this exogenous restriction.
This cost is not really behavioral cost. It's really,
no. It's just that. So this is the cost of confidence, but I think for them to matter, you need some kind of restriction. So either it's costly for you to send applications, like in US, you need to pay $100 for many applications, or sometimes it's even worse than if you have restricted choice, right? So it means that you need to calibrate yourself. So confidence becomes very important. So why is it problematic? So from equity perspective, it's problematic, right? Because if you think that, and we have some evidence from previous papers that usually females that tend to be underconfident and low ECS2. So if they're less confident, then it might be, you could speculate that might be the reason why they don't go for prestigious programs. Of course, it's pure speculation.
Very cheap question. Is this kind of work in Asia? I mean, the reason is you see here 2 professors, maybe some online, majority of female here in this country and in Asia.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I know that the confidence, so this kind of work, I don't know, but there is a behavioral work in Asia, and I think it's known that in China is a country with a reverse gender gap. So the reasons why people don't know, but it seems like it's more, maybe they provide more feedback on meritocracy. I think feedback will be very important in our paper. It's basically the causal thing, but I think in Asia, like if you go to India, there is a huge gender gap in favor of men. So culture matters, of course, and we know that there is some evidence of this confidence relates, competitiveness, confidence relates to stereotypes and society differences. But let's say this is average of where research has been done. But it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't have a stand on whether it has to be favoring or unfavoring women. It's just about miscalibration. And what I will talk about a lot is that kind of importantly, if you look at the market design perspective, confidence can hurt stable match. Stable match is a match that, if everyone would get the best out of what's possible for them, that would be stable match. And underconfidence misplaced the good ones, and overconfidence might potentially lead to ways that the good enough one doesn't get any place. So this is the kind of theory of a talk, nothing else. I mean, this is the reason why it could matter. But as additional motivation, I would like to say that in the context we are in, which is France, this has been also for some reason a big focus of policy. So policymakers really think that there is a lot in French system which is problematic, and they call it self-censorship. So they say that policymakers are particularly concerned about self-censoring, as the observations that students who underplace themselves in terms of academic ability are less likely to apply to selective colleges. And I give you some of the background why it is the case. So what we do in this paper, we basically measure confidence and see whether we can observe any gaps, and then we see whether this confidence actually relates to some extent to college applications, because it's also not straightforward. And finally, and most importantly, we have an intervention which corrects confidence, and we see whether this intervention matters. To do that, very briefly, we measure self-confidence of bit more than 2,000 French students who are just about to apply to colleges, right? And using an incentivized experiment, and we observe that there have a lot of miscalibrated beliefs, and these beliefs are indeed correlated with their applications. We see that best female students and best low socioeconomic students are less confident and apply to less prestigious programs. So this has a kind of correlational ones. And then if we correct their confidence by providing them feedback of where they actually are in terms of ability distribution, we see that this feedback significantly reduces relevance of confidence for their applications, and also reduces gender and socioeconomic gap to some extent.
I don't know the French system well, but I guess because of these standards, college admission, they must have standardized tests, right?
No, they don't. And that's very important. They don't.
I see. Because otherwise they have been informed.
Yeah, exactly. This is really super important. And one of the, I will discuss it separately on the last slide, but one of the takeaway of the paper would be a big support for this. There is now, lately, there is some discussion in labor literature whether it's good to have centralized exam or not. And this is, we say that is good if you take this channel as granted.
People in some part of the educational field must not like your conclusion.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's not about liking or not liking. We just provide whatever you can interpret it. I mean, I'll talk about it in the last slide.
First of all, I think it's a nice point, because you want people to have information so they can judge themselves better. Yeah. So knowing themselves, but also this particular channel is often overlooked. I know some papers, and especially in China, there are a lot of arguments that, you shouldn't apply after you publish exam grades and so on. There are like a couple of papers in games economic behavior, and I think they all based on this rationale that people should know how good they are. And this is completely, I mean, you should be ignorant of everything behavioral economics has been doing for the last 30 years to actually slightly believe in it, because it's just not what it is. Let's see. Let's say I'm happy to talk about it, but you are right. Feedback is super important, and this is going to be about it. So just, yep.
So I wonder, then how, since we don't have the standard, score for the student to get into the university, how the university in France actually admit their student?
Also, perfect question. I will be precise about it. So the short and correct answer, we don't know. It's non-transparent. No one knows. I mean, it's not that we don't know. Even centralized system doesn't know. So what they do, universities receive the profiles of students from schools. I will say the context. So they have the average grade. They have characteristics from teachers. So there is this kind of scoring sheet. And then they also get information who wants to apply to them, and they rank them the way they want it. So what I will claim here, that the most important determinant is their GPA in school. And this is what some policy reports seems to spit out, that in the end, this is what matters. But universities are it's very political issue in France, and it's not transparent. And the universities are very protective of how they select students. They don't have to report how.
Right. Another question though, the tuition, the cost of getting into the university in France?
It's free. So university system is free.
No, that's because it's, since it's free, what should be the restrictions for one person to be so humble not to try to get to the best university?
Oh,
Social
so
cost.
that's a very so this is a very a point of a person who thinks, I mean, have you sent your application to Harvard PhD?
Well, I don't.
So why? It's free.
Well, because I mean, it's not because of the tuitions, because I don't have the restrictions of the tuitions, but I have the standard score. I got the feedback and I know exactly I'm not going to get in. So I don't
So,
want
and they think they also know that. And you don't know, I mean, they think they also know, they think they might not get it. They might be a rejection averse. There are thousands of reasons why, and this is exactly the paper about it. And so we claim that part of it is self-confidence. I mean, if you have, and there is a lot of literature on that now in macro design, outside of confidence, but just basically based on chances. So if you have different arguments to make. If I didn't also apply to any PhD program in US, but for different reasons, but you might be rejection averse. You might think it's a waste of time. You might change your, plus importantly, you have 10. So you have only 10 choices. And if you start with top 10, it's very likely that if you are exactly placed at 11, you will be end up without university. So you need to calibrate yourself, and meaning cutting from top and from bottom. Yeah.
It is like 20 years ago in Thailand.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe almost 30 years.
So,
Yeah, no,
so now
when
it's
I want to
centralized.
Apply to college, I don't know my score. I just have,
Yeah.
and I have to choose 5 ranking before I even taking the exam.
Yeah, and in Europe, it is a very, it's not, it's, I mean, it sounds, I know you don't want to sound it as like, it's what is future, what is not, but in Europe, I mean, in some places, like in Scandinavia, people don't know the scores of a neighbor schools. They know nothing. They're my nephew, like a kid in schools, they don't get any feedback, because that's a system they think is good, right? In Finland. So if you look at the PISA distribution scores here, when my friends are always talking, oh, what is a good school system? We need to autocratic. I went to autocratic school system, Soviet one. I mean, if you get a bad grade, teacher will shame you in front of everyone and say, I mean, we expect more from you. This is a one system. And the other system is kind of happy kids system. No feedback, everyone is talented in something else. And then if you look at the distribution of PISA scores, the first two best scores are in Finland and South Korea. One is one of the most autocratic and one is the most hippie. So, I mean, things work differently. We don't know. So I think it's a complicated, nuanced picture. But for this, I think your 2 questions are exactly excellent point for this paper, right? So we don't know. Criteria is non-transparent. Mostly it's GPA. I will be more detailed about that. And why not to apply? Because there is exogenous restriction and because there are confidence things. So talking about related literature, so we of course relate to the paper, the behavioral literature, which document confidence and social gaps in the lab and in the field. So there are a lot of papers in it. The latest meta study by Oriana Bandiera and Cosas basically says that actually gender gaps are not as large as they think, but they're still there. So coming from the confidence going to the kind of connection into labor market outcomes, there are also papers which connect gender differences. So this is Buza et al. Paper, which would, 2014, almost 10 years ago. This is a paper which is closely related to us to some extent, because they measure the confidence of kids in school and they see how it predicts the track choices, academic track choices, but it's completely correlational. So and we have this extra step. So there are papers in different contexts here about beliefs. Is this also academic tracks? This beliefs, expectation of salaries, and different kind of. So this is about probability of getting an offer, how you behave on the labor market, and they see that graduates from MBAs, for instance, women are taking offers much more faster than men, so they kind of don't wait enough. And in terms of social differences, I think the most important papers are this big interventions by infamous nowadays Armand Falk and Karnana et al. So this is forthcoming Econometrica, where they in the context of Italy, they do this intervention with migration kids, where for a year, and this is very similar for this paper for Germany, where they mentor to kids from a migration background family for a year. And this mentor is kind of a university student who talk to them, try to explain what is education. It's a kind of multi-dimensional intervention program, very costly. And basically the main outcomes of this intervention leads to the fact that these kids start to more academic tracking, they shift them. And then there is a little, so in terms of matching markets and, relevance of confidence for stability, there is a paper, by Sichi, so it's correlation. So she actually shows in a lab experiment that if you allow people, even in context of lab, to apply in this markets without providing them feedback, that there is a lot of mess, right? So this idea of non-feedback application based on beliefs even in lab phase a lot. And we here show that causal effect on confidence on centralized labor markets. And there is a recent paper by Rustamdjan, which is related to ours, that's why it's marked red, where they do something similar to us in context of Mexican school choice, where kids should choose a high school, and their intervention is much more costly, because what they do is they to some of the kids, they do mock exams. So people go through mock exams and they learn about their position in mock exam. And they also see that then they call it gradient between ability and ambition, that once you have this mock exam, this gradient is better. So they kind of apply more in line with ability. And so finally, this literature I basically cited. I want to start on information on chances. There are two papers. One is forthcoming QGE. It's in context of school choice in Chile, where people have very limited choices and they developed an application. So they apply through an application, and the intervention is that when they see that application is overly ambitious, so doesn't have any schools with high enough chances, they basically tell you, your application is too risky. You might want to include these schools, and that's the way around. So this is kind of information on chances. So basically targeting people miscalibration. Here it's very complicated because there are like 3 or 4 schools and there is not much information, but they have a way to calculate the individualized chances because there is some criteria based on which schools actually accept decisions. In our case, which we obviously a very related paper, so we were thinking how to frame our paper differently and talk to them. In our case, we would not be able to calculate anyone's chances. That's actually true, because we don't, without being too noisy, right? We would have to rely on kind of statistical model of approximation because we don't know actually which criteria is taken into account. And Laruco is also a great paper, and this is also on college admissions, and there they also see that they don't measure any confidence or anything, but they see that people often do mistakes in college admissions because they violate the basic rules and people don't know it, and they tell them that. Yeah. So now let me actually start telling you what we do. So I'll start with institutional background, then explain the data and go to the results. So French educational system, it's not easy, but I'll try to be, clear. So there are middle schools, which they call colleges. So after middle school, there is this tracking. I think you can go to either, these are high schools, which are called lycées. So you can go to general track, which is the most prestigious academic track. So that's basically the track to university. Then you have technologique and professionnel. So these are really bad kids, technologique. So in the spirit of France, chances are going everywhere. So they do not restrict, and now there is a lot of discussion in Germany not to do that too. So that after this lycée, they do not restrict your chances to apply to universities. Even after the lycée professionnel, you can apply to university, but basically you will never get it. Right? So you can be, but the chances are very low. So everything we will do in this paper will be about kids with lycée général, because this is the relevant guys who were kind of the 90% plus% of kids of the 95% of university students are actually having lycée général. And importantly for our system, their baccalaureate is comparable to each other. So they take this baccalaureate exam. So basically after finishing high school, you get kind of baccalaureate, that's called. It's kind of high school diploma. And once you have it, you participate in centralized system for any continuation of your education. So it's called Parcoursup. The system is in place from 2018. It's a dynamic system, very interesting. We will be talking about Parcoursup of 2021. In total, there are 900 candidates and 19,000 programs. So they submit a list of 10 programs. There are exceptions where they can do sub-programs for some programs, but basically, if it's a university, it's just one. But for some class preparatoires, I will talk about them in a second. You can select different locations, so you can have more choices. So importantly, to understand the setup, the most prestigious track. So there are public universities, license. These are majority of continuation. So these are good. So technical universities, technical high schools, these are less prestigious and kind of lower degrees, kind of vocational training kind of educations. But public universities are important. But there are also very salient and the most kind of probably problematic system in terms of policy debate of French college, French higher education is this class preparatoires. Extremely elite schools, which prepare you for 2 years for an entrance exam to this extremely elite tracks, grand écoles. So if you see, like probably 90% of people you met from France in academia, they finish grand écoles. You have now, my generation have exceptions, like including Camille, but it's like outrageous that you were not in grand écoles. So grand écoles are most elitist. I mean, École Polytechnique, it's still extremely white and extremely male kind of programs. And for Macron, it's like an agenda to increase diversity in these things, because people go through generations, 5 generations grand école. It's like this. So for society which positions themselves as kind of very socialistic and equal opportunities, this is kind of problematic. But so this class preparatoires, we will use them as one of the binary outcome of prestige, right? So if you apply them, so kind of applying to them, meaning that you kind of aim high, that would be one of the variables. Importantly, it's after them, you can fail entrance exam, right? So you lose 2 years, you go to class preparatoires and then do not enter. But it's still a good track because those who failed, they are accepted to the 3rd year of public universities. And there is evidence that they do better than those who went to public universities all along. So it's a really dominant kind of strategy for you to get there, despite of this risk of not getting lower. So this, who knows what, it's very important in this paper. So student information on March 11. So March 11 is the deadline on that year where you have to finalize your application. You have to say where you apply. So final of school exam is June 11. So this baccalaureate exam is actually, it's called baccalaureate exam. It's actually centralized in terms of, there is the same exam, which is not run in school, but it will happen in future. So they do have some feedback about their final exam for literature, which happened in June last year, because they don't study literature in the last year. So they have this signal, and what is important for us and for them, and it's very salient, is this first trimester GPA. So they have 3 trimesters in the school year, and I think first is finished in December or so, and they get this a very salient piece of paper for the last year, which parents have to sign, where they have a GPA and the rank within their class. So they know something about their relative ability.
So here they know the literature exam only, which is a standardized test. So
I mean, they know just grade in literature exam. It's not like standardized test. You're thinking amount like out of 120 points, how much you get, and which rank in the population you get. No, they just had this some exam which is outside of the school, and they know the grade for it, and that's it. So they know like out of 20 how much points they get there. But I think, and this is also part of this GPA thing. So what is important is that you get this piece of paper from teacher, which says, your GPA for this trimester by subject also. And I think parents have to sign it. So that it's kind of and basically this is the same what universities know about it.
Suppose we can look at the, I don't know if maybe this paper cannot, but you talk about stable matching, right? Is it possible that because actually they have one feedback, I mean, in a particular field, which is literature, would that imply that if, I mean, students in the literature field in college would have more stable matching compared to other, because that's where they have more information.
So we don't know. We cannot check that. The complexity of this is we could check whether the gradient of applications relative to their literature score is better than relative to their GPA. But I guess what you ask is complicated, because it would mean that universities should rank them based on literature score, which of course they don't, right? Because most of the universities actually value maths and other scores, which means that you cannot see which side kills the stable matching. Yeah. So college admission criteria. So, but yeah. So we could see whether this, however, it doesn't have relative. I'll come back to that point. So the only relative thing, is within class rank.
For the GPA, you mentioned, the system of the university, they have ranking of the university. How about the school, the high school? Do they rank? Like, for example, 3.8 from one school, would it comparable to another 3.8 from the other school? Do they give any weighted for the school,
It's important, right. Yes. And important, and the anecdotal evidence that some schools are they're known to be competitive, right? So if you have in, let's say, 15 out of 20 from a most prestigious school in Paris, it's probably better than 15 out of 20 from Marseille. It's anecdotal. I show evidence we have. We cannot say that. So we claim that it's not massive. So we cannot see it on averages. But of course, some points are there probably, but it's not that all French school. And now we have, so Renka is on the market. So we want to do exercise which we haven't do, like to see whether, for instance, Paris fixed effects for school is better. So with this we didn't check yet, but the one I show you so far is that we don't see it massively, but we cannot be sure that there are no specific school things.
I also have a very, maybe I'm missing something, but when you talk about the confidence, self-confidence, I was thinking about, it's probably two things. Kids may be, lack of their self-confidence. That's one thing. And also kids may lack of the school admission system, like lack of the confidence of the school admission system. For example, I may be very confident that I am smart, but I don't have trust on the university admission system. I never know how they actually admit the student. I know I'm smart, but I don't know how I'm gonna get in because I don't know, like.
Yeah, I know, totally I got this point. So first of all, I will be very precise soon what we mean by confidence, because, psychologists mean one thing, economists another thing. I will be very precise what I mean, and this is your knowledge and your academic ability. What you are meaning, the trust and system, anything else, everything can matter, preference can matter, but I will hopefully convince you by the end of the talk that our interventions corrects only what we call confidence. And if it matters, that's going to be causal effect of this, while we never will claim that that's the only thing which matters. So college admissions criteria, basically non-transparent, okay? And the only thing they know is this first trimester GPA. So universities receive that, so they have to rank students based on it. I'm completely out of track time, but so I will hurry up. As long as you don't shut me up at 1 hour because I took some questions, I will be more or less in time. Online survey. So what we do, so how we do it. So first we did online survey. this is probably, first, please look at this graph. So this is a timeline of 2021. On March 11 is the deadline for finalizing your choices of universities. On January 12th, the platform opens, so you can log in as many, so you create a profile, right, as a student with a national student number, which, and then you can, you can finalize your choices here. I mean, not finalize, you can put them in and change them as many times as you want, but what is there on March 11 is what is sent to universities. Then universities rank students, nothing's going on, but starting from May 29, this dynamic college admission system starts, which is on the May 27th, the first offers are issued. So university, it's dynamic college deferred acceptance. So colleges rank students, and the first day they send offers to students within quarter, right? Students have some time, up to 5 times, to make sure that they keep only one offer. So they have to reject the others. Once offer is rejected, university send the offer to the next student. And this dynamic system actually runs until July 16. To be very precise, if you don't believe me about the centralized national exam score happens here. It has really nothing to do with your college admissions. So the truth is that you, of course, your acceptance is issued conditional of not failing centralized exam score, which essentially never happens on, at least on top of the distribution, which we consider, because we consider mostly top of the distribution. So what we did is 2.5 weeks, up to 3 weeks before the deadline, we started to recruit students for our online survey. Originally, we wanted to do it with the help of the ministry. They promised, they didn't do it. It was complicated. And so what we do, we basically start to target them with ads on Instagram, Snapchat, and Facebook, advertising the survey where they could win some money, Amazon vouchers. And then within the survey, we measure their self-confidence. As I promised, I tell you exactly how we do it. And then we do this confidence correcting treatment, which everything was pre-registered. Yep.
Do you worry about the
Bias?
COVID effect?
COVID effect. No, within not. And so I think COVID is actually good for us, because in this year, our GPA is even more salient for the college admissions because of some rescheduling of something. I forgot the detail, but in principle, I'm not worried. Let's see what, by the end of the talk, what could be the worry. I cannot come up yet. So what we did in the survey, and this is not all, because it's going to be second paper with the second intervention, but for this paper, we collect their demographic information, what they will submit to the university. We will not use it here, but we will use it only in the later part of the paper. Measure self-confidence, next slide. And then we randomize them into treatments, control, where we basically go on, and confidence feedback is where the intervention starts. And then we have the incentivized outcome of bet, which will be one of our outcomes also very late, where we ask them, where do you think you will end up? And if you guess it, you will get a lottery ticket for raffle of things. Probably one thing which could be very worrying is how representative. I think it's for internal validity is not very important in terms of treatment effect, but in terms of scaling up effects. How crazy are our Snapchat, Instagram users relative to admin data? And the truth is not too crazy. We have probably slight, so between control and feedback, essentially there are no differences. Between admin data and surveys, there are some differences. We don't test them. All of them would be significant, of course, because here we have 400,000 observations. But what we claim, they are not too bad. So one problem might be slightly more women than in general. So women are more likely to actually answer these ads and surveys than men, or be in social media. And second, we have slightly more, almost perfect share of disadvantage, region difference, and we have slightly more bad students with no honors at the cost of excellent students, but not too much if you think of as feedback. So so we claim that it's generally not too bad. I think if you compare it to this, Stancheva style of surveys where they do it, it's very in line where you compare this, any kind of selected sample to the representative one.
So, how do you randomize the participants? Just simple.
Completely random. So basically, it's a Qualtrics survey. So every second guy was. So Qualtrics did it. So we didn't. So you log in.
So you don't
First login is control, second login treatment. First login is control, second login treatment. So before going to anything about it, as this is so importantly, we have admin data, right? I don't know where I'm supposed to tell about it, but somewhere I should here administrative. So I forgot to tell about this. Importantly, what we have is administrative data. Administrative data contain their real applications, offers they get, and where they go. Everything which happens here. And we match this data to the survey. So
how you link them?
Yes, we link them through student number. We ask them for student number. And yeah, so we student number, and I think for some of them, some extra matches we get through the CT, date of birth, school thing. So birth of the gender. So this was so for some who we do not get a student number, because some of them didn't live, we get extra 200 or so through this.
So how do you get this administrative data?
We just apply. You pay for as long as you pay. In France, you apply with a project, and they can give you. It's open data, conditional on being very expensive, and you don't get them. We have to remotely access them. So there is this remote access. No, but it's easy. Once you get the project, you apply, you get the training of privacy, you get you buy the box, you get your fingerprint, and once you can use it. So this is admin data, just to show you that maybe what we do makes some sense. So these are the grades in admin grades. No honors, high honors, highest honors. These are 4 categories. That's the only thing we get in admin data. We don't have their finer grades. And if you look at the minimum prestige, I will be precise what prestige is. So let's believe me that there is some kind of measure of prestige of the program. Then we see that if you look at the minimum prestige, so basically what is the worst school they put on the list, there is not much going on. But if you look at the maximum prestige, is basically ambition, right? So where you was the best shot you get. We see that for no honors, nothing's going on, but the better the students are, and especially for the highest honor students, so there is a very large gap between ambitions of boys and girls. So girls are being conditional on being the highest honors. They apply to much less prestigious programs than boys. This is admin data. It can be anything. It wouldn't be preferences. I don't claim anything kind of. And the gap is even larger and more depressive if you look at the high SES versus low SES. Right. So low SES kids apply to less prestigious things. So maybe it's connected to confidence. This was just kind of motivating picture. So how we measure confidence, finally, I deliver what I promised. So first we ask them for their GPA rank. And for reference, if we ask them for the reference sample student GPA rank, first we ask them, what is your GPA in first term? It's this trimester thing, right? So this is a salient grade. It's self-reported. So they tell us it's between 0 and 20. And it has even the decimal, so it's like 15.6, they say. They tell us, and we take it as granted. There might be concerns. I tell you, I'll try to address them. And on the next slide, we ask them, out of 100 students, how many do you think how many do you think have a lower GPA than you? And then they can move this slider, and if they have 100, it means that they think they're the best. If they're 0, they think they're the worst. So we also explain them here. 73 means that you think you belong to 27 best students. That's the 2 things we ask from them. Importantly, we explain them what are these 100 students. We say that we have 1,000 students with bac général to compare you to, and we take random 100. So they have to present their percentile, basically. And then we pay them if they are plus minus 3 rank. So it's incentivized. So now, and we of course know their real rank because we have the sample of GPA students. And if you look at this, what we see is that by gender and below socioeconomic background, this is 45-degree line, which means a calibrated thing. We see, of course, that people on the bottom of ability distribution are extremely optimistic about themselves. It's mechanical. It's in every sample all the time. This guy thinks they're average, but they of course are one of the worst ones, right? But importantly, when we move towards the top of the distribution, we again start to get the gender gap. That boys are better calibrated than girls. Girls are underconfident. The same for the low ECS. Here it's even more flat. This guy's really delusional, thinks that they are good. And only slightly they start to believe that they are better. But again, on the top, especially for them on the best one, there is a gap. It's just a picture, but this I will show you regressions that is significant. So there are some of concerns that you might have. First of all, that our GPA is self-reported. So we cannot do anything with it because we don't know their true GPA. In admin data, we know their honors. We know their no honors, honors, high honors, or the highest honors, right? So what we do in this graph, we see where our GPA lands them. And we see that essentially, almost no one is too far away from. So on the borders of the grades, we see some people who are wrongly categorized, but it's maybe because their baccalaureate grade is actually different, right? But within grades, so this is a grade and the grade point average of the students in survey for this. So these are who are, let's say, these are who are real highest honor students, and this their self-reported GPA. And all of them kind of lie where they should be. And only, I think, 5% of students would be categorized differently. But these are the guys who are really close to the borders. So we think if someone is kind of lies about GPA, it cannot be massive in our data. So it makes sense. Also, it relates to your point, I think, to some extent, where how different are the GPA between schools, because this honors, no honors is already centralized, right? It's a thing. It means that if there are some crazy schools who give very low points to very highest honor students, it's not massive because this would create a lot of noise here, and we don't seem to have. So now, if you take the real GPAs and build the confidence things, so this is Gastron versus real honors, we see that by gender, for highest and highest honor students, we have a significant difference in confidence. And for low ECS, for the highest honor students, we have the highest difference. This is basically the same in regression. So, okay, we measured something, why it matters. Does it matter or not? So let's try to, on the first step, we want to see whether there is a correlation, whether confidence actually predicts anything real in terms of college admissions. So what we look at is a prestige defined as a Z-standardized average bac grade of enrolled students. So in France, there is no clear ranking of universities, but of course we know that, for instance, this class preparatoires are competitive and effective, but we need some kind of number, right? So how to do it? We basically calculate the average quality of students who go there. So there are papers who do exactly like that, and we follow that. Alternative measure would be to see the competitiveness in a sense that proportion of students among those who apply who get there. We have it as a robustness test in appendix, but it's much noisier measure because if you look at the most competitive schools, these are not prestigious schools. These are small degrees on nursery or so on. So sometimes this very low key degrees, they can be very competitive because all students who don't know whether they want to do anything, they kind of apply there. But if you look at the top prestige programs by this measure, it's going to be exactly what, you know, any French person agree on prestige. So we use it as a main one, and we have two kind of main outcomes. One is an application, right, where the people apply. Maximum prestige out of all programs they list, minimum prestige, average prestige. And we have a dummy to application for at least one class préparatoire, right? So as a salient measure, very easy to interpret. And then we also have match. We know where they end up, right? Of course, it's harder to match, but at least we have prestige of final match and whether they are matched to this class preparatoire. So these are the outcomes. So let's see whether misconfidence. So from now on, I will work with the word misconfidence. That was a 75 iteration of how to call this variable. In principle, for behavioral economists, we would call it overconfidence. So it's your guessed rank, the higher the better you think you are, minus your true rank. If I think I'm the best, so 100, but actually I'm exactly median, so I'm overconfident 50. So we call it misconfidence, which means if it's positive, you are overconfident. If it's negative, you are underconfident. What we see is that misconfidence controlling for true ability and controlling for fixed effect grades. So because of this mechanical effect of bad students being more likely to be underconfident or overconfident and good students more likely to be underconfident, you need to control for true ability as much as possible. So we control it with fixed effect back and true rank. We see that misconfidence is highly correlated with all matters except of minimum prestige. And the reason for minimum prestige to be not correlated is that in France, basically first of all, universities give you priority if you're a local student. So there is some local safe university who will take you for sure if you have bac general, and most of the people just put it there. That's why it's not really about ambition. So everyone has a safe choice. So not ambition, and it's not really about safety. It's really about ambition in France. So we will not have many outcomes on minimum prestige, but on maximum prestige, there are huge correlations, including correlations with final match. So confidence correlates a lot. Doesn't mean it's causal. Maybe confidence correlates with something you said, for instance, trust in a system and so on. But in terms of correlation, it works. And we see that it both underconfidence and overconfidence seems to matter, especially for application, for class prepared paths, underconfidence seems to drive away applications.
Just a technical question. Why the sample is like 1,000? I thought you have 2,000.
Yeah. So this is just control, right? Because we use this is just control because just because in feedback we already corrected it. So to see the correlation, we look at only on control. Thank you. Actually, it's important. I will.
And the final match, so you get the data as well from the admin
Yes,
data.
yeah, that's admin data.
At the end,
This
where they
all
end
of
up,
it,
right?
all outcomes are admin data. The only non-admin data is the misconfidence and and a true rank.
Actually, what matching that I have in mind before was actually it's more long term, right? I mean, you get into the college and then there's could be separation. Could you follow up and look at? I mean,
no, we don't. The reason is that we ethical approval we are constrained to drop the data like certain numbers. Because it's a good question and we are working on it, whether you might get to Harvard, but if you drop in half a year because of depression, because you're not good enough. So that's but I personally, I think it's a big educational question. I think we don't have an answer to that, but we perceive in this paper, we perceive that ambition and acceptance to more prestigious university is a first success. Yes. Yes. And in France, drop-in rates, it's not like US PhD program or something. Completion rates are very high for universities in France and so for good students. But I don't claim that there are not enough dropouts to not have a difference, right? So we don't know that. So now this is just correlation. So can we claim anything causally? And for this, we have this confidence corrected treatment. In this case, it's very simple. So to those who are in treatment, after they told us what they think they are, we basically tell them where they are. So we correct their belief about, you could think about information on how good you are. For us, it's confidence correction because our confidence is based on relative ability. And here tell you relative ability. For instance, here we say you expected that 80% of students in comparison to you have lower GPA, but actually based on the GPA that you reported, 83% of students have lower GPAs than you. So you are 3 percentage points too pessimistic. And we tell them the real rank and the guess rank. So that's it. But of course, and we use green, orange, and red. So red for deviations more than 10, and red deviations orange deviation for more than 5, and green less than 5. But it's just color coding. What's important that we give them hard information on actually their percentile. So this is another example where they 28% too pessimistic. It could be also optimistic. It's going to be any direction, right? Just examples. So now let me show the results. So here now the sample is back to the correct one.
Sorry, maybe I missed something, but the rank is from all students in your sample here. The GPA from
No,
2000.
so we have important. We have 1,000 students. We know the GPAs of 1,000 students from Bac General.
Yeah.
We collect self-reported. We explain them. 2 weeks ago, we collected GPAs of 1,000 students from Bac General out of the students where you are, and we tell them exactly the feedback on that, because that's the only thing we know. We don't.
Okay, so it's self-reported GPA.
It's
from your
self-reported
sample.
GPA relative to self-reported GPAs.
Okay, thank you.
So let's see. So this is the result. Basically, this is all sample now, treatment and control. If you look at the misconfidence, that would be kind of the same estimation I showed you, because this is the relevance of misconfidence for control treatment. And we see that it's relevant. So it means that the more misconfident you are, the more applying, because overconfidence basically leads to applications. So if you look at the rank feedback, which is treatment, right? It actually has no effect for those, because we have interaction of misconfidence and rank feedback. For those who don't have any misconfidence, or those who are well calibrated, they have no treatment effect, which makes a lot of sense, because basically treatment tells you that you are right? If I thought I am 80th percentile and you tell me that I'm 80th percentile, I don't change my applications. But those who are misconfident, so if you look at the interactions of feedback and misconfident, that's where the action happens. So for not all, but for most of the outcomes, basically, I mean, for all outcomes, we have a negative sign. So basically, the relevance of confidence goes down by feedback. So we lower. So if before misconfidence was 0.6, so this is interpreted in standard deviation. So it means that if you are 10% more confident, 10 percentile more confident, your 0.6 standard deviations applying to more prestigious programs. And the relevance goes down. I think the easiest is to look at the class preparatoires, for instance, because it's a dummy variable. If you are 10% more confident, like if you are, basically you are 70, but you believe you are 10, right? So then you are 1.4% more likely to apply to class preparatoire. And once we corrected it, it goes down to 0.5. So confidence matter. And if you look to the extent that if you look only on treatment, then misconfidence is actually, I mean, it's still there, but it's not significant anywhere. So to basically correcting confidence makes your applications more in line with your true ability, while your beliefs, miscalibrated beliefs, are not significantly important anymore, which is, I think, the main result of this paper and the main thing we want to have, right? We want people to apply based on their true ability rather than their believed ability.
Can the student change until the system closes?
Yeah. So our intervention is before the deadline.
But in between?
Yeah, as I can do.
Can you observe the change? I mean, I know what your evidence kind of, I mean, support that, but it would be even more direct, right? If the kid chose this and then the intervention came in and say, no, I changed.
No, this is true. And this can be done. We cannot track that because what we have in admin data is only their final choice. But I mean, there is no alternative explanation from my point of view, because I mean, it's why would the treatment be different? But I'm happy to hear the. Let me go one more step first. So what we originally motivated everything by the gaps of low socioeconomic and gender gaps. And yeah.
Can you, I mean, here it just means confidence, right?
Yeah, is this
Can we look at
misconfidence?
under and then?
Yeah, we do split, and we see that the main is it's driven by both, but mostly by under. Here's in French college context, underconfidence is the most important because it's actually, you're good enough. And this is the best students, right? So you're good. So these are all sample, but here it will be I think here it will be clear why. So what we do here, we concentrate on highest achieving students. So of course there was miscalibration at all, but where we observed the gap was on top of the distribution. Conditional on being highest honor, girls are less ambitious than boys, and conditional on being highest honor, low socioeconomic kids are less ambitious than high socioeconomic kids. If you concentrate on them, in principle, there the treatment effect should be the largest, right? And we want to see whether actually there is a way and potential to kill the gap in application if you concentrate on highest ability kids. So now we look only at highest achievers. And these are gender gap. So gender gap, these are not dramatically high sample, but it's sample bigger than most of the lab experiments we see. And these are high achieving girls. So it's and boys, so highest achievers, people who has highest honors. And here we see that in control, girls are dramatically under applying relative to boys. Average prestige is like 0.5. So it means that believing that girls are on average apply half of standard deviation less prestigious program than boys. Here it's very easy to interpret because it's a dummy. Girls are 33% less likely to apply to class prepared one. And these are conditional on being highest honors, right? So these are the best students who actually has the best chance. So once we have the feedback actually has slightly negative effect on boys, if anything, because they are most likely to be corrected actually down, but not significant. But for girls, feedback has a huge effect on boosting. So in terms of average prestige, it's almost closes, 80% of the gap. I think it's too good to be true. For a long time, we couldn't understand how it can be, and I'll show you next picture why. I think now we know exactly what's going on. And for instance, it has a marginally significant like 20% increase in acceptances to class preparatoires. So the effect for girls knowing that they're good, because these kids, arguably, all of them received positive feedback that you are in top 10%, right? Because if you are a high ability student, top 12%. So effects are really large, and we were concerned about it. And every presentation we ask, and what can we do with this? Just effects we find. But now once you look at the distribution, I think it becomes clear. So these are control and treatment effect, and these are prestige of applications. If you look at the boys in control, and the guys just applied to just prestigious program, they know they're highest honors, and they exclusively to prestigious programs. All of them include this. And once treatment happens, not much happens. There are a couple of guys who apply less prestigious, but not much, right, going on. But if you look at girls in control, they are dramatically all over the place. There are girls who even apply to less than average prestige program, being the highest honor student, right? So there is a huge tail. And what treatment does, it moves not too many, but really big outliers. And that's why this treatment effects size is so big, because it moves outliers shifting. They're still not as good calibrated as boys, but they shift a lot the outliers who were thinking dramatically crazy, like applying to really trashy universities. If you look at the low, oops, I don't know what's happened. Okay. If you look at the low ECS, again, we see that even larger and huge, even for medium precision, for low ECS on control, huge gap. So low ECS versus high ECS, high achieving kids, 64% of standard deviation, less ambition, 30% less likely to apply to class preparatoire. And once you give them feedback, here they even overcompensated. So there is a gap in acceptances is almost disappearing in class preparatoires. Again, if you look at the distribution, here, of course, high ECS have also girls. That's why it's all over the place. But here, they're less all over the place, and we have the kind of small shift. But if you look at the low socioeconomic, there are kids who are massively applied to really not good universities as the biggest ambition, conditional on being highest honor students. And killing these outliers creates these huge effects. So that's basically all I had to say. I have one, given that I'm on time, I will skip this. So we have mechanism. So we have some additional evidence from that this comes from the fact that they update their beliefs about how likely they're going to be accepted. So it's really about whether they believe they're going to be accepted or not. We have this offer beliefs because we ask them where they will apply, and we ask what is the probability they're going to be applied. We have this offer beliefs for program. Of course, it's a complicated measure because, of course, the more you apply ambitiously, the rationally you should have lower probability beliefs. That's why you have to control for quality of program. And we have two versions. One is just elite tracks, and the other one is top 10 prestigious programs. And we have a measure of optimism. So how optimistic you are. So your belief versus the actual offer. And the third is, I mentioned this, the prestige of the bet from the survey. We ask you, it's a very fast measure. Right? So where do you think you will end up? And what we see, if you look at the mechanism, that misconfidence correlates with, I mean, sometimes it's less significant for belief of getting an offer, but the effect size are huge. That misconfidence correlates with this measure of your chances. So the more misconfident you are, the more you believe. So the more, if you're overconfident, you are more likely to believe that you will get an offer from top 10 program, from class préparatoire. You are more likely to be more optimistic, and you bet on more prestigious programs. And even treatment effect, we have it only for prestige of the bet because
when you say bet, you incentivize it?
Yes, we incentivize it. Because we said that if you guess correctly, then we will contact you in September, and among those who guessed correctly their placement, we will have a lottery of additional vouchers. So here we have even treatment effect on the prestige of the bet. That so misconfidence matters a lot, and the relevance goes down. So we interpret it as all about chances, whether you believe it's realistic or not. So discussions, I think here it's likely, I think it's very relevant to the point I said, and I promised to discuss why is it just France, or where do we expect this? So I think it relates a lot to the nationwide examinations and centralized system. So in France, students know the grade in a class. So effects might be larger than in countries like Germany, Denmark, or Finland, where they don't even know that. Right, so there are countries with less information than France. So France is bad, but not as the worst. But similar effects in many countries with no nationalized examination, for instance, Belgium, Canada, Italy, except of some subject, Mexico, Netherlands. So there are many countries who have similar systems. So for them, we expect similar effect. And of course, we have much lower effect in the countries with a long history of centralized examination, Hungary, China, Brazil, I guess Thailand can be added to the list. We were not sure because this is based on one of the survey people. And I think whereas the under or overconfidence plays a role, here it's clearly underconfidence, but this depends on system a lot, because in some systems which are highly competitive, let's say Brazil, where only 1 out of 10 people get any seat, maybe, and in France everyone will get a seat. As the overconfidence can be also very costly. So correcting on both sides is very important. And market level effects. So here we cannot really, we don't have normative stand whether we, what is a targeted gender gap or targeted low socioeconomic gap, but at least we can claim that this intervention unambiguously shift market outcome closer to stable match, because there is no power in the opposite direction, right? So we closer to calibrated ones, because if you correct beliefs kind of crazily, they will never end up on the outcome, right? I mean, if you push me to say my application to Harvard, it will not be consequential for the market. But if I push me to somewhere where I can be accepted, that's where the change happens. Yeah. So
just a curiosity. So I think the literature like to call this stable, right?
Yes.
I mean, actually, it's an inefficient matching, but somehow the literature doesn't want to call it that way.
No, the reason is that I know this very well.
Because
the reason is that stability and efficiency might be in conflict. So stability is the efficiency concept constrained on fairness. So stability is fairness concept. So it might be more efficient to have non-stable match, because we will have let's say Supari wants to go somewhere and he doesn't go there. but Supari is better than me. And we are somewhere ended up. So that that you're going to this place where you're better than Supari, and I go to somewhere other way, and we want to exchange. So that would be Pareto improvement for us. But if we exchange, then Supari will have justified envy to me because she's better in this place than me. So stability and efficiency are always might be in conflict. They don't have to be, but they often in conflict. That's why stability is respect of grades, meaning that conditional that no one is having this justified envy, meaning no one is rejected from a place.
It's another definition of equilibrium concept, right?
Yeah, stability is equilibrium concept.
There.
Yeah, stability is equilibrium.
Okay,
concept.
it's not stable in the sense of nothing will change, stuff like that.
No. It's a market design term. It's basically an absence of it's an equity concept and it's equilibrium concept because it also means nothing will change because no one can create a easy coalition. Because why would you push me as a market designer to be in unstable one? If I want to block you reject. Yes, I applied here and designer didn't as my top choice, and then I ended up in the other place. If you want me better than whoever designer sent to you, and I want you better, we can just say, why would we respect the match the designer give us? Let's just accept me. You're happier, I'm happier. In this sense, it's stable also in this kind of context. So no one can exchange beneficially if you perceive universities as an agent. So yeah, and the last slide is basically, I think we in terms of labor literature, we bring to the table confidence, which is studied a lot in behavioral econ. In terms of behavioral econ, I think what we bring to the table in the context of one of the largest stakes causal effect of confidence we know. So as I said, two things. And applications, I think we support this cheap and scalable, easy to implement policy for provision of relative rank where better provision is impossible, for instance, where there is no centralized exam, which is actually embeds this rank. In some provinces of China, there was a big discussion and they actually put now your rank in a province. You don't, so it's not that you have an extra step to Google your distribution and to see where you are told exactly the number out of me. And I think this last one I want to say that there is this recent literature on gender also saying, so there are some papers. One is by Caterina Calzamilla in Spanish context, which shows that centralized exam may be not too good to girls, actually, they claim, because of the stress, right? So the girls, conditional on how they perform in school, they go to centralized exam and they underperform, and this has implications for gender gap. So kind of showing the negative story of it. And I think we show that there is the other side of the story, that at least centralized exam tell them how good they are. So they're, the effects are complicated. So story is more nuanced than just stress during centralized exam. So that's it. Thanks a lot for lots of questions and
Any other questions?
Yes, can you accept online questions?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
where should I go?
Hi. Hi. Just from online, so maybe I missed something at the beginning. Like, what's the cost if you are picking the university that's like too high from your ability? There is a chance that you may not get into anything. And like, how do you like distinguish between like underconfidence versus like female could be more risk averse?
Great question. So one point is we do measure risk and we control for it. The second question is that the second answer is that in everything I talk through the correlations, I think risk might be alternative explanation potentially. So we control for it. But once we do the causal evidence, when we see the treatment effect, I think I think unless you would speculate that us informing you about your relative rank somehow changes your risk attitudes, I think we are safe. So basically, we keep risk constants because our intervention is irrelevant to risk from our point of view. That's why. But in principle, risk can play a role.
And I'm sorry, did you answer already that, like, what happened in France if you like pick it too high? Is there a chance that you may not get to
So
anything?
this first part of the question I missed. So the second question was about risk. I answered. So in France, what happens? I mean, if you are unassigned, I think there is some scramble market for the leftover seat. It's outside of what we look at, but in principle you might be unassigned, right? Of course, if you apply only to the most prestigious and you're not there, you're just unassigned. You have to skip a year, or you go abroad, or I mean, as everywhere. There is a scramble for unassigned seats, which means that if you're a good student, which is a focus of most of what we do, especially of the last part, then being overambitious will lead to the fact that on a scramble market, you end up very low, right? Because I mean, best schools are gone. So definitely below your ability. But as I also said, and that's why we don't see a lot of action on the minor, on the minimum prestige thing, is that in France, if you have the baccalaureate grade from general track, so this bac general students, local university of your has to take you. So in a sense, it's not too risky for you to try. And as long as you include this university in your list, you will go somewhere.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And is it normal in France that like this year I got some place that I don't really like, and next year I take another exam, renew the exam, or
I think because there is no centralized exam. I mean, baccalaureate is something you finish school, so it's not it's not like in Japan or China where people would sit a year for getting. At least I never heard of it. I think you can wait. I'm not sure in France, but in Germany you have this idea that if you really, because they also have this tracking, and if you finish gymnasium, and if you really want to study something and you don't get a place, you can wait for years and years, and at some point you will get it, but you lose your years.
yeah. In Germany you get extra point every
Yeah, you wait a little bit. So if you wait for 5 years, you can compensate, I don't know, 5% or 10% of distribution. Yeah. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very nice talk. And well, actually, I think there's some implication for the Thai education system. But actually, it would be interesting because we have the test. We use a test. We are like more like a Korean system. I don't know about Chinese, but we are more like Japanese and Korean, where we use standardized, centralized tests to enter. I mean, most of public universities, and nowadays students see their score before they apply. So
I think it's a good system. I mean, myself, it's also. I mean, I was probably the last cohort, or maybe one before last in Kyrgyzstan when we didn't have it, and now we have it, and I think it's good for. I mean, if you coming from central, I think it's not very relevant, and it hurts people maybe from central schools, and they're well informed, they know what university is good. I think there are two sides. Here we do not address that, but I think if you have this course, another big benefit relates to other stream of research which I was citing, is that knowing which universities are better, right? Like, how do you choose between programs? When you are connected in capital and you go to good school, you know that your teachers tell you, there come universities come and advertise them. But if you are in a rural area, in a region, like my cousins saying, they don't know what is good university. But if you know the previous year cutoff grades, you kind of learn something, right? University can say anything, but if they attract the best students, it means something. And I think the centralized exam brings us to the table too. I'm not sure someone evaluated it. Maybe it's a good idea if it's done.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for
And
having me.
thank you,
It was a
everyone.
pleasure.
There is some